everybody. Welcome. I'm Suzanne Sparge. I'm the Executive Director of 516 Arts, and I'm so happy to see you all here tonight. I'm just going to make a few quick announcements and thank yous. I'd first like to just take a moment to remember Catherine Kaminsky, who passed away last week. She was one of our board members for many years and a very, very dear friend and part of the arts community. So I just wanted to take a moment to think of her. Thank you. So I'd like to thank Lauren Tresp, who is the publisher of Southwest Contemporary, which organizes this annual exhibition that we're hosting here. And she's going to be speaking in a moment. Thank you to all of the amazing 12 artists to know now. And 516 staff who are running tonight's event, JC Gonzalez, Rachel Pablo, and Danielle Ulibari. Thank you. Danielle's live streaming. We've got a bunch of folks online listening as well. And I also like to thank our board member, Juliana Silva, for being here tonight. Thank you, Juliana. If you don't know this already, 516 Arts is a nonprofit organization, and we have membership, and members are a really big part of us being able to do what we do. So there's a membership brochure up front. If you're not a member, please consider joining. And there were so many funders, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but the City of Albuquerque is a really big one. And the fund at Albuquerque Community Foundation, New Mexico Arts, and then some amazing national funding from the Warhol Foundation and the Ford Foundation. So we're very fortunate to have that support. The next thing I'd like to do is introduce Rachel Pablo, who is our curator, and she's going to do a brief land acknowledgement, and then Lauren will come up and the talks will begin. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Good evening, welcome everyone. Yate shiketo shidane Rochelle Pablo Yenesha Techini Neshle Toidlini e Bashes Chi Sinjakine e Dashache Ashchi e Dashanele Agot Ego Denetsa Neshle Nane Joje Nesh De Neshan. And I'd like to from the words of 516's advisor, Roger Frawa from Jemez Pueblo, quote, Albuquerque is currently built on the ancestral homelands of the 19 Puebloan nations that was shared with the Mescalero, Fort Seal, and Jicarilla Apache nations, the Utes, and later the Dene. Their respective ancestors, those living today, and the unborn. This land always has been, is currently, and will always be for the winged, fin, and four-leggeds. We are acknowledging the sacred living waters and rivers that cross this land. Finally, the sun, the moon, and all the stars and planets that keep our systems in balance. We welcome all, end quote. And plus, I'd like to add the words inspired from the reservation dogs. I'd also like to acknowledge our dinosaur Oyate. Okay, and I am finished.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Suzanne, for hosting the exhibition, of course, and for hosting and presenting this event tonight. As Suzanne mentioned, my name is Lauren Tresp. I'm the editor and publisher of Southwest Contemporary magazine. If you are just now, for the first time, encountering the 12 New Mexico Artists to Know Now, this is an annual program we've been doing for 5 years. This is our 5th cohort. And every year we have hundreds of artists across the state of New Mexico submit their work in an open call to be juried by curators and arts leaders also from the state of New Mexico. So this is our way as a publication of surveying the state of contemporary arts in our state. Every year, I think we're gonna run out of artists to submit since we get so many. And every year I'm blown away by both the sheer number of artists working in the state and by their talent, by their vision and commitment to their practices. So every year we publish write and publish profiles about each artist's work, as well as host an exhibition, with the exception of the lost COVID year. But we couldn't be happier to have partnered with 516 this year. This is by far the biggest exhibition that we've done. If you haven't read the profiles, around the gallery you can actually scan a QR code to read more about each artist. You can pick up a copy of the field guide on your way out, but nothing really compares to hearing from the artists themselves. So when we conceived of this event, we thought, how can we get all 12 artists in a room? How can we give each of them a chance to talk about their work? And we came up with this idea of doing what we've called lightning rounds. So each of the 12 artists, and I am absolutely astounded, we could get all 11 of you physically here, and me participating virtually. So each of them have 5 minutes to talk about their work, which is a challenge. Sometimes it's harder to be concise than to go on. So I hope that will give everyone vigorous applause as they move through these slides very, very quickly, and we'll have a lot of fun learning more from each of them. So thank you all artists for being here. And thank you also to the 516 team for corralling all these folks. So thank you for being here and enjoy.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you. I'm actually going to switch because this one seems to be a little less. Oh, okay. Up first, we have Kirsten Engelbauer.
Thank you. Is that a good distance? Okay. Hi, my name is Kirsten Engelbauer, and I'm an artist and designer living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I work full-time at the School of Architecture and Planning here at UNM. Shout out to my Fab Lab crew if you guys are watching. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about my creative process, my practice, and more specifically, how my creative journey has led me to sound art and vibrational frequency research, and kind of how that body of work has evolved over time. So you'll get the highlight reel in 5 minutes, but here we go. So a little bit of context on my art background. I got my degree in sculpture, and that really informed my interest and understanding of how spaces and how materials can impact our experiences within those spaces. So an early body of work of mine dealt with chairs and kind of the idea of that. And I've also always been interested in how sensory input of spaces and experiences affects kind of our perception of not only the artworks, but the world around us. The images you're seeing now are part of an ongoing experimentation series I did with sound art and, with sound vibrations, and these were called sonic landscapes. And what I would do was create infrastructure to suspend a tray, like literally a cookie tray of materials, like paint and oil and sand and water. And in those experiments, I would use a surface transducer, which is like a tiny speaker that doesn't make any sound, but it pushes vibrations directly into the matter. And in these experiments, I was able to kind of find specific little moments that caught my attention, that captured my interest, that really fascinated me with how the sound was behaving when how the material was behaving when influenced by sound. All of these experiments I video documented and was then able to take screenshots of those video documentations. I will say not every single experiment was like beautiful and would turn into work, right? You'd be surprised how many materials, when you run vibrations through them, they look, dull, not exciting. They just look like a little moving pile of stuff. So these still images that I got from the videos and from the experience, I was able to turn into further works that were kind of abstracted, not only through the new material that they were imposed on, in this case, laser etched glass, but also I think it expanded the way that sound was able to be perceived in space and not just heard. At the same time that I was working on sonic landscapes, I was also working on tiny little sound experiments with various little materials. So for example, I would put like little wire sticks on a vibrating tray and watch them bounce around and play with each other. And that led me to create these tables that were essentially a snapshot of my studio at that time, or for the past 6 months. And they were something that I ended up creating over and over again as installations in spaces, and they were kind of the moment that helped me realize that one little idea, one single vibration could expand outwards into a larger piece. Some of those are upstairs, and some of those I've been able to exhibit in other places. The experimentation ultimately is really vital to my practice. I think it gives me insight into, not only myself, because it's a very introspective process to just kind of sit at a table in the dark in it's kind of like a garage, but it's a metal building studio, and just exist with those vibrational experiments. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about the potential for expanding a single idea into a super large moment. One such moment is the piece that you're seeing now called Pink Noise. And for me, this was the perfect example of a singular vibration through one material that really just captured my fascination. And I was able to then expand it and multiply it and build something that was truly a sensory experience for myself and hopefully for the people who came and saw it. I also wanted to mention that something I've thought about a lot is how every object that we encounter has kind of its own resonant frequency, like a guitar or a violin or a species of wood. Every single piece of matter in the universe has a resonant frequency. So I've thought a lot about if you transpose that back inwards, what is the resonant frequency of the self? And you hear this phrase all the time. What do you resonate with? And kind of resonating with moments or ideas or people, and that's something that I've always been interested in my work. The last thing I will say is I talk a lot about in my artist talk and just kind of in my general thoughts about my work. I've mentioned that my work speaks to kind of queer identity and queer expression, and for me, that connection, at least what I've come to, because I know it's ongoing, but what I've come to with that connection is that this work kind of makes these invisible phenomenon visible. And as queer people, myself included, I think often we struggle with finding visibility and finding our personal resonance in the world and our ability to kind of outwardly vibrate and affect those around us. And so I truly believe sound possesses that power to connect us to each other and to ourselves and to the universe. Thank you.
You're fine. There we go. Up next, we have Caitlin Bryson.
I'll be reading from my notes so I can stay on time. Thank you so much for being here. There's such an amazing turnout. It's wonderful to see everyone. I engage with art making in queer, transcorporeal, and transdisciplinary ways. And this means I work with varied techniques, materials, species, peoples, and processes which operate across a myriad of disciplines and forms of intelligence. My artworks emerge into the world as a direct result of these collaborations. My practice collaboratively works towards environmental and social justice and is uniquely focused on generating cultures of care and inclusion for humans and multi-species. I received my MFA in Art and Ecology from UNM, where I concurrently studied art and mycology, which is the study of fungi, with research in ecotoxicology And I'm excited to say that this was my first week teaching as a full-time faculty member in art and ecology at UNM. So I work with fungi, plants, materials, and biodegradable materials, to engage more than human audiences, while also working to facilitate human communities through social practice and collaborative caretaking. For this project titled Many Hands, I worked with my dear friend Beata Sosi Pena and Tewa Women United, along with Cheyenne Antonio and the Red Nation, to build a community-led bioremediation installation in Daneta to filter toxins from a fracking blowback spill from 2019. My current project, entitled Bellow Forth, is another community project that is focused on restoring soil and health soil health and environmental resiliency through storytelling and collaboration, and community and ecosystem science. This is also a social practice project that is focused on the wildfire impacted communities from the Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak wildfires last year. The project, which you can see a small example of upstairs, is a multi-species and multidisciplinary project weaving biodiverse soil systems, which include fungi and bacteria and microorganisms, with human stories to grow relationships and to facilitate ecosystem succession in these post-wildfire landscapes. So facilitating succession means that we are nurturing relationships in the systems, allowing communities to be built, maintained, strengthened, and nourished by feeding their abundant interactions and honoring their cycles of living and dying. In an ecosystem, each generation makes food for the next, and this creates habitat and growth. Beginning in January of this year, I've been working with impacted community members to collect and archive their stories, experiences, and relationships to the land before and after the wildfires. In exchange for people generously sharing their stories with me, they've been provided with home-cooked meals, mutual aid resources and donations, and assistance with labor needed around their homes and land through a community-generated project that was a sub-project called the Labor of Love, which is this big volunteer, group-led project to help folks moving a lot of soil, honestly. The community stories are coming together as a story quilt, which they're being embroidered and then buried onto this quilt. And the intention is for the multiple patches to be buried throughout the 350,000 acres of burn scar. The story quilt will also have pockets of microorganisms, native microorganisms, and seeds, and planted atop the quilt will be saplings. Together, this collaboration hopes to quantify the efforts towards resiliency. Working again with my dear friend Beata, who's pictured here, we created a guidebook and zine that centers restorative justice as the necessary and primary place for restoring soil. It also features thoughtful and well-practiced approaches to land renewal and post-fire landscapes designed by Beata herself. And to quote Beata and end, because I think I'm getting close, maybe I'll have a little bit more. Quote, as we work to abolish centuries of colonial and genocidal policies, attempt to disconnect indigenous peoples from their lands and cultures, there is hope that remains in the continuance of indigenous and land-based ways of knowing. When this knowledge is indigenous-led and implemented as part of the bigger land-back movement, it can help to soften the climate crisis and strengthen the relations and reconnection needed to heal communal consciousness and our true place as humanity within natural law and within our ecologies. End quote. Bellow Forth invites us to consider the implications of multi-species connection in ecosystem recovery. To acknowledge our place within these ecologically complex systems, this community-driven artwork centers human and more than human reciprocity, land back, and mending broken relationships as the key components of resiliency and repair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Up next, we have Apollo Gomez.
Hi. So I'd like to start with a little bit of history of queer photography. So in the early 1900s, Claude Kahn, a French surrealist, created photographs that challenged constructs of gender and protested societal norms. Kahn is quoted saying, "Masculine, feminine, neuter is the only gender for me." Unsealed by Yale in 1989, Carl Van Vechten's archives of his male nudes are made public. He is known for photographing significant and prominent figures during the Harlem Renaissance. His depictions of male nudes are a small insight into the secret life he led. During the post-war Red Scare, gay men and lesbians were thought to be communist sympathizers and a threat to national security. Before his photographs were destroyed, George Platt Lyons donated them to the Kinsey Institute to ensure that his legacy lived on. Reclaiming the female nude, T. Corrine photographed lesbian sexuality. She often used kaleidoscopes and solarization, a technique in photography used to reverse tones. She used these techniques to create a rush of desire while obscuring her female subjects. Stephen Arnold, Salvador Dali's surrealist protege, photographed historical tableaus fusing depictions of religious and queer iconography. He would often create ethereal sets using drag and counterculture aesthetics. Hidden keepsakes and mementos made in secret, photographs of forbidden queer relationships. In the book, Loving a Photographic History of Men and Love, more than 300 photos from a private collection celebrate this hidden history. Photographing my friends, lovers, and men I've met will continue to be an important part of documenting my life. Larry sits on his bed with a teddy bear, a gift from his boyfriend. Whitley gestures his arm towards his eye, covering the scar from heart surgery. I create portraits of softness and masculinity. Michael, a painter, laying down to rest after a long day at a workshop. Brian is photographed through the green foliage on the right. On the left, Taman, averting his eyes from the camera. A crystal hangs around his neck, onto his bare chest. David, photographed in his bedroom gripping his thigh, a masterful sense of design. We lost him last year. A history erased of those we loved and those that fought. As rights are again taken away and history is rewritten, it's our job to write them back in. This is Queer Erasure, a site-specific installation of erased queer activist photographs in a solitary confinement cell. Manual Enterprise versus Day. In 1962, the Supreme Court decided that magazines with photographs of nude male models are not obscene, allowing the dissemination of physique magazines that were marketed towards gay men to be shipped through the US postal system. Adonis, a 40 by 44 inch collage of bodybuilders, men focused on their bodies, mass, and symmetry. On the right, a Polaroid of my friend Dan practicing his posing 3 months before his bodybuilding competition. Catherine Opie photographs herself and sits faceless, pervert carved into her chest. During the AIDS crisis, gay rights activists chastised respectability, and the leather community was disowned. Robert Mapplethorpe also documented his own community in New York. I photographed my friend Evan in his leather harness and his jockstrap. Joseph is covered from head to toe in latex in his outfit, a double exposure, a second self emerging into the background. Is this obscene? Should there be kink at pride? Using double exposures, skipping ahead. This is a photograph by Laura Aguilar. She's a Chicanx queer aesthetic. She created her own queer aesthetic in LA. And on the right is a Polaroid of my friend, kind of elevating himself on a pedestal. I use double exposures, prisms, emulsions, and manipulation. I transform the Polaroids of my subjects, surrealist representations of queerness. A double exposed Polaroid of Andy at home. On the right, Frank recently described his experience of being photographed as emanating desire while holding on to loss. My friend Mikey, with one of his works of art in the background, a halo of mindfulness and sense of self. Nate, on the right, is an exotic dancer, nude and carefully placed arm, double exposed, both revealing and concealing. Danny, while visiting New Mexico, was photographed with a round frame Polaroid, a porthole, his body stretching towards the viewer. On the right, an intimate Polaroid of Tim in his jockstrap, gyrating, a sense of movement and dynamicism. Religious and heteronormative systematic constructs made me aware of my own queerness as a child. I felt a cycle of queerness, guilt, and shame. In Pleasure Closet, installed here in Woman House, I invite viewers to kneel at a pew and peer into a glory hole and contemplate their part in this continued cycle. And I'll end on this slide. It's a portrait that I made during the pandemic. On the left is a portrait of Catherine Opie, self-portrait Beau, a jovial performance of masculinity and reclamation of self through access of images to images of agency, advocacy, and awareness. The cycle of queer shame can be broken. Thank you.
Now we have Hernan Gomez Chavez.
Hello everybody, my name is Hernan Gomez Chavez, and for the sake of time, I'm going to be reading off the script. So the first two images are from my Structures Abstract Model series from 2015. This piece is actually based on a crane from Pennsylvania. The base of the sculpture is made up of small triangles inside of 4 larger ones. The next piece after this is referencing the Pington Bridge in Chicago, Illinois, where I was pursuing my MFA in 2016, and is a combination of a structure from that bridge and a transmission line. The sculpture used basic lattice design. The title for the series was contradictory. A model is a scaled-down representation of a real object or structure. Therefore, a model cannot be an abstract. The next 3 images show work that was made while I was studying in Chicago. I created 3 panels on wheels right after Trump got elected, and I moved them around during the inauguration protest so people could write on them. One was painted like the US flag, another like the Mexican flag, and one white in between them. A very literal reaction to the anti-immigrant rhetoric at the time. I was living in the Pilsen neighborhood during my time in Chicago, and in 2017, keeping in line with what I did before, I made a white picket fence, again on wheels, which people could respond to the prompts. Who is my neighbor? ¿Quién es mi vecino? This was meant to have people from Pilsen speak about living in an area of Chicago, which is still undergoing drastic changes due to gentrification and displacement. I moved to different areas around Pilsen during the months of July and August, in which I spoke with people about what these changes meant to them. This was one of the responses, and it says, Pilsen is not for sale. The next 3 images after this are from 2018. And just waiting. I timed all of this perfectly, trying to make sure that I was keeping with it. It's titled Ni de aquí ni de allá, a piece I made in response to finding out about the child internment camps at the border in 2018. I was thinking about a sign that a child asylum seeker may see crossing the border. And this came to mind, which translates to not from here, not from there. And this really shiny sculpture is part of a trophy series that I've also made in 2018. It's a direct follow-up to my previous body of work, Structures Abstract Models. This piece was my first polished stainless steel work. The series was a body of work which I created literal trophies referencing symbols of power, being oil wells, power lines, and cell towers. The creation of these pieces was very process intensive. These 6 pieces have polished concrete faces and have different surface treatment. The yellow ones have yellow zinc plating on the steel, and the ones on the right are black powder coating. The next work, which I'm going to start talking about now because time, is titled Won't You Be My Neighbor? It was an altar for Dia de los Muertos referencing the US-Mexico border, Mr. Rogers, Scott Warren, and the organization No More Deaths in Arizona. In January 2018, Warren, a volunteer with No More Deaths, was arrested and charged with a felony for harboring migrants after Border Patrol allegedly witnessed him giving food and water to these two people. This work is meant to speak to the contradictory nature of our country, which praises kind words and neighborly interactions, while treating refugees and immigrants as less than human. And the next two images are of Querencia, defined as a place that nurtures you, where you belong, where you feel safe. Querencia is an artwork made in collaboration with artist and graphic designer Yvette Serrano. We were inspired by the work of New Mexico poet laureate Levi Romero, who has been writing about Querencia and belonging for a very long time now, and teaches a course on Querencia at UNM about belonging in New Mexico. Yvette and I were born and raised here in Santa Fe. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, if you can tell. Yvette and I were both born and raised in Santa Fe. The work was meant to look like a mobile home, to reference the homes in which we both grew up in. This collaboration came about through a shared interest in the notions of home and belonging, and similar lived experience. Like the Pilsen piece, this was a mobile work we took out to the streets to engage the community in Santa Fe South Side. This next image is of the installation that we see right here at 516, and it's something that I created back in 2021, where I actually reused the panels from the piece I did in 2017. This sculpture of a legless giant is meant to reflect on the disparities in Santa Fe and the perseverance of the community living in the South Side. It was inspired by electric towers in the Chihuahuan Desert, because the large structures loom over the landscape like austere, beautiful, synanthropic giants. And it's also based on a Calle 13 lyric, Un pueblo sin piernas pero que camina, literally translating to a nation without legs but continues to move forward. The idea of a legless giant is meant to show the in-between state of rootedness and uncertainty of the immigrant communities in Santa Fe, and how important the working families from the South Side are for the well-being of that entire city. I'm gonna end by talking about a piece that I did in collaboration with Carrie Wood in Santa Fe, titled Ode to the Multicultural Mural La Guadalupana. It's a mixed media sculpture commemorating the Chicano mural that once stood on Santa Fe's rail yard district on Guadalupe Street. Reason why the Guadalupe is there, it's maybe like less than half a mile away from the historic church. And it uses Sani scarves surrounded by forged steel roses, and above are the words of Gilberto Guzman, one of the co-authors of that mural. I like to expose art to people who don't go to museums. And below, keep Santa Fe multicultural. This work is very personal to me because it was actually inspired by the work of late Santa Fe-based artist Tigre Michelle Lively. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lynette Houses.
So I'm going to share a story of inspiration. When I was young, about yay high, I went and I saw a bronze statue glistening. It was of an Apache family. And from my perspective, when I was small, that Apache statue was standing resilient, strong, among those institutions of that downtime skyline. That Apache family was standing strong against those institutions, those banks that tried to take us out. That symbol was an empowerment for me. Little did I know that I would be doing public art. Little did I know and realize the power of public art and representation. Fast forward 30 years, now I'm in the public realm. I'm creating public murals. I'm using my art for a message to empower and to create and build community. What if I never saw that? Would I be proud of where I am? Would I be connected to my culture? I graduated in 2016 with my social work degree and found myself working with many Native American rights movements and groups. I used my medicine to help promote and build my communities against copper mining, threats to our sovereignty. Many indigenous communities are going through this. I found mentorship with greats like Nana Batchakon and Douglas Miles, who paved the way and showed me, solidified me in how to work respectively and culturally sensitively with community. This is an M police murder. And sometimes representation matters. Just like that little girl, I imagine other little girls seeing me creating out in the space, out in the community, working hard on the scaffold, on the lift. That representation of them seeing me out there matters. Seeing a brown-skinned woman working hard, making it in this world through her art and through her medicine. This I used as the abolishing of the Entrada mural, a movement that happened in Santa Fe and is ongoing also. The climax of the protests of colonizers, modern day colonizers of the state, the police state against women warriors. Our indigenous sovereignty fight goes on. This is how I use my murals and how I use my medicine to honor indigenous matriarchy, to honor indigenous sovereignty, to honor all three of my tribes, Apache, Navajo, and Taos Pueblo. Creating and building community. This is called Braiding Reconciliation, an installation at IA. The ropes are made of yucca, corn, husk, and cotton that represent the binding of the Pueblo Revolt cords that were used by our Pueblo runners. Pueblos, Taos Pueblo Reservation, working within community, building an honorary mural. Murals can be healing. Murals can memorialize. Murals can build. Representation, working with community in Denahotso Reservation, on the Navajo Reservation. I find very much enjoy my sense of building in community, working within my tribal organizations. I love working with murals, a Taos Pueblo homage to the Carrier of Life mural done here at the Harwood. As you can see, the Taos Pueblo silhouette. I work in my traditional pottery designs. I'm inspired by contemporary designs, paying homage to Apache deity and ways of life. See, I come from all these beautiful tribes, and I'm proud, because without that, I don't know what I'd be creating. This informs my art, and art informs life. The Taos Matriarch mural up in Taos, working with 100 per Taos community initiative to bring awareness to their new initiative of providing resources much needed in Taos County. Process, everything starts from pen to paper, whether it be pen to paper and then another on canvas study and then to larger scale mural. I found myself working in different mediums such as digital, and this reflects the mural behind you. Over here, she walks with the sun. I use murals as a form, a tool for social change. I use them because they are accessible to the community. It's not locked up in some institution. It speaks directly to the community. I like being out in the world and interacting while I'm painting on the street with my community. An installation over at the Harwood Museum, please go see that. It's up until January 24th, the Harwood Centennial. My name is Lynette Houses. I'm Chiricahua Apache of the San Carlos Apache Nation. I'm also Diné and Taos Pueblo. I'm a muralist and I'm an artist. Thank you very much.
next we have Karma Henry.
Hi, everybody. Inanyene Karma Henry. Manahu. My name is Karma Henry. Hello. And I'm here to talk to you about some of the work that was done in the gallery upstairs. And it all started with a little residency at IAA in Santa Fe in the middle of the pandemic. And it really changed the way I did my work. I took time at Cerrillo State Park and walked around, took a lot of photography, enjoyed looking at the flora and fauna, the colors, the textures, the sky. As a painter, all those things are so incredibly important. And I started painting small and basically replicated anything I photographed. And then I used a lot of stencils, which I used from pottery of the area, weavings, architectural designs, a lot of things that made me resonate with Santa Fe. And as I did that more and more, I started working bigger and bigger. And during the residency, I was able to complete a few pieces. Some of them you will see upstairs, and I will talk more about them as we go along in the slideshow because I'm talking fast. But as a painter, I tend to take a lot of photographs. I will be in mid-conversation, and I'll say, excuse me, or maybe not even that, and I run outside and take a picture. Driving in the car, trying to take a picture without wrecking it. You know, my family's gotten in on it with me when we're all together because I use everything through a photograph so that I can remember that little snippet and complete the work, because ultimately that becomes the most important thing. This piece here I was able to complete after my residency, and I was thrilled with how it came out because part of the work I do with stencils, I never know how it's going to look in the end. And I like that spontaneous nature. It kind of adds to the allure for me. It's about the moment I took a picture. What was I feeling? What was I seeing? Who was I with? Where was I? How did all those things happen and come together in this painting that I'm lucky when other people get to enjoy it as well. This picture here, I was leaving the campus. It was night, and I literally threw my car in park and jumped outside to take a picture. Probably not the smartest thing, but you know, it pays off in the end, and you can see that upstairs as well. This picture here, driving along St. Francis in Santa Fe, all I was thinking was noodles and Blade Runner, and I got out of the car and took the picture and didn't know what I was going to do with it. Next day I ran and bought a canvas so that it would approximate what I was looking at, and I ended up making a beautiful painting that I wasn't expecting, I wasn't planning on in my rotation of things I wanted to get done. But as we make our art, we make more and more and more, and it becomes the next thing in the process. And for me, that's just, what did I make last time and how can I do it different the next time? This was a lot of fun for me, and so it spurred a whole series of paintings that carried me through up until probably this last beginning of the summer. As a Santa Fe series, I was very adamant that all the images I used, the stencils I used, were specific to Santa Fe, New Mexico in general, because I wanted to reflect that place that I was at. And it made a big difference for me. It challenged me, and it made the work move forward. And now I'm doing different things as I'm moving along through this whole process. I actually relocated to Santa Fe, and it changed everything completely, because now home, Eastern Sierras of California, that's something I'm working on in my work because I'm no longer there, I'm here. So even though I'm working here in Santa Fe, I'm starting to carry in everything that I know about home being a different place now. So I'm using Paiute basketry symbols, design elements. I'm warping how I'm using it as far as I'm trying to reference all the basketry that I am responding to. I have a gazillion photos, archives, sketches, drawings of all these images and designs, and now they're coming back into the work. And I'm starting, I moved away from using other imagery so that I could be true to myself, because now I'm some Paiute lady who paints in New Mexico. I'm no longer in California, so I have to respond to that and make that part of the work. These new pieces are sometimes now New Mexico landscapes, but they're carried through with elements of basketry designs. Triangles are becoming one of my favorite shapes because it changes throughout time, and it changes throughout the way I use it, as well as diamond patterns, zigzag patterns. Because baskets are so important, I'm also carrying through some of the elements of just what the shape is. How is it used? Is it conical? Is it round? Is it coiled? There's so many elements that I'm starting to pick apart and build a new language in my work. So this carried through, and now I'm here. So hopefully you'll follow me along and see how it all changes. Thank you.
Teaching is a significant part of my life. I am adjunct professor at the Institute of American Indian Arts, known as IAIA, and named by UNESCO as one of the top art institutions in the world. You might know the IAIA Museum of Contemporary Native Arts, our absolutely world-class museum in Santa Fe, devoted to scholarship, discourse, interpretation, and the exhibition of contemporary Native arts. I teach studio arts courses and a special design seminar, Public Space Design and Public Art, where students reconceptualize open spaces, taking eco-conscious and climate-aware approaches, considering how to indigenize community spaces and plazas. Our president, Dr. Robert Martin, said, "We are cultivating leaders who are decolonizing the arts." I see teaching as an art form in itself and approach teaching in the same manner that my art emerges, returning to the land, practicing whole earth thinking. My name is Ani Rochelot. I am a descendant of Huron-Wendat ancestors. I work primarily in art installation, object sculpture, ritual and performance art, and drawing and painting, at the intersection of human-ecosystem relationships and community transformation, across a variety of media, video projection, vegetable and floral life, vines, grasses, plant life, branches, bed sheets and tablecloths, wood, bronze, ice and steel, cast glass. I use the voice of each material to communicate meaning. And since 2017, my signature media is tumbleweed. One of many is a being who roams spirit-like in a ghostly cloud of tumbleweeds, that omen of the Dust Bowl era, and now of erratic climate configurations. I walk to resurface our suppressed connection to Earth, to reinvigorate our collective memory of Earth, to haunt our somnolence, our fatigue, our amnesia, our disregard. During the pandemic years, my studio was the Arroyo. I spent 2.5 years here. There is a vitality, a truth, and a grounding in this space. A visit to Arroyo Ring forces our body to confront its unfamiliarity with its own extended cellular environment, and is a mark where people separate from land. Haunt, Climate Memorial with Sponges, number 2, is a culturally strategic, narrative-disrupting challenge to self-centered individualism and a transfiguration of the ever-present turning away from ecosystem consciousness. As powerlessness is foisted upon the world in this all hands on deck, climate emergency moment. A sacrifice zone is a geographic area that is being environmentally or economically sacrificed for the benefit of polluting industries, most often located in low-income communities. With I am not a sacrifice zone, form and material come together. A wall of tumbleweed evoking the dust storms of the 1930s and 40s, evoking colonized, desiccated, mismanaged lands. And I trust the civil defense water survival canisters bring home climate urgency to you. You know, New Mexico is the nation's second highest oil producing state and often the first, even in the world, with record highs in 2023, the source of rising seas, floods, depleting aquifers, the melting Arctic, drought, and wildfires all over this planet. 11 species of tumbleweed outcompete native, locally adapted vegetation. But as a benefit, they also soak up depleted uranium. And they display for us techniques of endurance and self-organizing as they uproot, propel themselves across vast distances, acrobatically whirling high upon the winds, often joining together, traveling in groups. Invasive and native tumbleweed species together create an amazing seed dispersal system. Artists, all creative thinkers, have the unsettling, collaborative, public art interventionist imagination to creatively haunt decision makers. I am only one of many. Become you the many. To change everything, it takes everyone. Create the global movement. One of many invites you, the many, to walk along streets and byways, along rivers, alone or in groups, becoming climate consciousness, walking in silence or in song. Do this on your own, or to set up a climate art workshop with me, I will come to your group. Message me on my website, AnieRuchelot.com, or on Instagram at AnieRuchelot, or at Become Climate Consciousness.
How you guys doing? My name is Suiva Sevilla. I consider myself a new media sculpture artist. My work is often a combination of art and science, diving deep into concepts that I just don't know much about, but I find interesting. I use a lot of lights, cameras, sensors, screens, projectors, generally just technology and tools to help review the world. My practice is mainly an avenue of study for me to understand something that I don't. At its core, my exploration revolves around the idea of phenomena versus experience. When we think about light, heat, or really any form of energy, it exists in the world as a phenomenon, that is to say an action, an event that happens out in the world. But it also exists as an experience, as a sensation that we feel, something that provides us insights about our surroundings. This duality intrigued me, and as an attempt to reconcile them, I try to view it all more as material. I started by simulating light in a digital space to try to craft purposeful images. Obviously, we can form light using something like a projector, but I was looking for something a little bit more basic, a little bit more focused, really like a focused action and drop down to fundamentals. A digital space, of course, gives us a lot of freedom to play with different properties, play with different rules. And so I ventured into visualizing gravity wave data. This process involved literally molding a lens out of this data, running light through it, and then seeing how that light interacts. Eventually, you can start to combine multiple sets of data, and you get this really versatile and dynamic system that creates just these really vibrant and dynamic images. In order to display them, I made them out into this sort of like light box form factor, so that the light could actually like glow and emanate from inside. The ultimate ambition is to physically fabricate these lenses, right, and try to get these images out in the real world using active light, using more of like an active light process. If the simulations that I've been doing are accurate enough, I should be able to reproduce something similar. As I delve deeper into sort of thinking about how light exists in our world, how it begins in our world, I started to think about light sources and light fixtures, and I started to view heat as just another scopable form of energy, especially with its connection to infrared light. Infrared, even though we can't visually directly perceive it, gives us a lot of information as like the heat of an object. And so I brought in thermal cameras, if you want like it, as a tool to sort of translate that invisible into something more visible. In a second, you'll see a thermal portrait of me and my dog. I'm very proud of it. Of course, thermal cameras and security cameras come with their own baggage, linked to sort of like surveillance, government oversight, regulation. I think it's really interesting that the most accessible way that I had to include thermal photography in my work was through just security cameras. But of course, they're the best tool to really like perceive these sort of changes. This is an example of a physical lens that I'm trying to fabricate. It's the first one. There's me and my dog. The first thing that I did when I first got the thermal cameras was blast a propane torch at a metal sheet that I had mounted on the wall of my studio. It was just the easiest accessible heat that I had, and I was really interested in observing sort of the concentration of heats, but also the diffusion of that heat back into the environment. So, you know, it's a long process, and it's something that you cannot see at all, unless, of course, you're using tools like this. Sorry to keep moving the microwave. So from this turned into the sink sculptures that I've had, which are just metal sheets with some heaters attached to them. And then, of course, a whole system of a thermal camera, a projector, a computer, tools that help to actually directly visualize that movement. But at the end of the day, it's basically a space heater that I've left on all summer. Sorry if I'm and then when viewers get close, they become part of that system as well. The camera picks them up, then their thermal image is projected onto the surface as well. Here's a quick diagram. It's important for me to stress that the true essence of the sculptures is not like the metal or really the physical form of it all. It's very directly just that rhythm that happens throughout the day as the heaters come on and off. Everything else is just the infrastructure that we use to actually be able to perceive that. In the same way that we have a lot of infrastructure within our own lives that actually helps us exist, right? It becomes a tangible representation of thermodynamics, which is like the study of energy movement through the world. And it's very interesting that thermodynamics as a field started with the rise of industrialization. Once machinery became commonplace, once people were using machines to make a profit, it became profitable to understand waste and efficiency and where we can pull every single ounce of profit. We get terms like work, efficiency, productivity, all of that tied back to our relationship with heat. And so as we bake in ever-increasing, record-breaking summers, I think it's very important to understand that existence cannot happen without heat. Every action we take, all the energy that we expend is not fully efficient. Every mile we drive, every step we take, every word I say out to this crowd right now generates a little bit of surplus heat, and so at the end of the day, the world is just a little bit hotter either way. And so yeah, as we witness all these different heat diffusions, let's remember that they're completely irreversible. Once that energy is released, it cannot be recaptured. And so these sculptures were an attempt to sort of like spotlight that and give it the importance that I think it has. Great.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jennifer Thorson.
Hi. Across my work, I examine relationships between religion and human behavior, especially regarding ethics and prescribed moral systems. In this 2008 series of 10 photographs entitled Baptism, I outline my experience of being baptized into the Southern Baptist Church at the young age of 6. While undergoing invasive neurological testing in 2010, I produced Medic, a series of 10 photographs which survey biblical teachings about earthly suffering, death, and resurrection. I'm particularly interested in beliefs surrounding the afterlife and how they affect daily decision making. In Lamentations 2013, I leaned heavily into religious symbolism and allegory. I'm fascinated with emotional relationships formed between humans and objects, both sacred and secular. I believe objects carry memory, perhaps even transfer human energy. In this piece, I rescued 2 broken dining chairs and a table from the roadside and repaired them. I ritualistically bathed thousands of torn cloth strips in warm water and bandaged the objects in the walls of the room to form a picture representing the old body and the new, death and resurrection. In the series Testament 2015, I secured a rental house in Albuquerque for the duration of 1 year. I outfitted the house with furniture and objects from my Texas childhood home, the source of my spiritual foundation and early formation of my belief system. I used biblically symbolic materials such as wool, clay, and human hair to produce sculptures and small installation pieces to be installed in each room. Actors interacted with each piece, and I documented their performances photographically, producing 12 photographs. I received an official diagnosis of anxiety and depression in 2014. This series explores the relationship of anxiety and depression to evangelical Christianity and how the two intersect, influence, and amplify one another. This series also addresses larger questions about self-image, significance, purpose, and legacy. The premiere exhibition of Testament took place in the rental house. In each room, I created altars using ordinary beds, tables, and chairs. By repurposing the materials used for initial sculptures, I created 2 new sculptures to accompany every altar. The house mimicked a sanctuary, each room acting as a station of the cross. I began heavily researching world religions in 2018. I'm especially interested in where and how religions overlap and intersect. For this ongoing photographic series entitled Book of Prayer, I've published a public call via social media inviting people from all religious affiliations and belief systems to participate in a social experiment. Registered participants' names are collected, then randomly paired by drawing names from a jar. Volunteers meet in each other's homes and offer prayer, meditation, or positive thoughts for one another while I document photographically. Under lockdown, I created a line of COVID-themed baby clothing using scanned drawings of the COVID virus drawn by my 5-year-old son. Here, I'm interested in the vocal uprising COVID provoked among conservative evangelicals regarding sanctity and preservation of life and public safety protocols. While under lockdown, one afternoon while washing our groceries, I began making marks on rubber gloves with my children's red paint. Mark making reduces my anxiety, and here, with every mark, I recited a short prayer for my children's safety. The rubber gloves inspired a new project entitled Manus, where I shared a worldwide invitation for people to paint a pair of their own gloves and submit them to be included in an immersive installation piece. The task of each participant was to mark a pair of cotton work gloves in any manner they like, while offering prayer, meditation, or positive thoughts for a young child, Caspian, who suffers from severe seizures. Over the period of 1 year, I collected by mail 2,080 gloves from participants in 11 different countries worldwide, representing incredible diversity and a wide variety of belief systems. I collected the gloves and dyed them using medicinal pigments and cast them over wooden molds to create 3-dimensional form. I produced 1,040 studio photographs detailing every submitted pair of gloves. Some of those you can see back in the back there. I installed the gloves in a large mass, together with 500 handmade tin prayer bells. I invited young Caspian to come and explore the installation, to enjoy it, and simply play inside the space. I made 2 large photographs documenting his interaction with the piece. Additionally, I produced 2 portraits of Caspian, relying once again on religious symbolism and object metaphor. To reference the Christian faith of Caspian's family, I transformed one room out of an abandoned Catholic mission, painting the walls and hand-stamping gold icons. He's holding a loaf of bread and is surrounded by pink and red roses, lilies, and carnations. Again, the Manus piece examines relationships between faith and human behavior and the intersections of varied belief systems, especially concerning compassion, empathy, and humanity. Bell Tower, the piece that is here in this exhibition, is a division of the larger work, Manus, and includes 500 handmade tin prayer bells and a table and 2 benches crafted from upcycled wood. Motion sensors detect the presence of 2 pair of cooperative hands on the table when they touch, intersect, and it tracks the gestures of every hand. And those gestures trigger audio recordings of recorded prayers from around the world. Currently, I'm working on 2 large memorial pieces. I'm researching the rise of Christian nationalism and its relationship specifically to gun violence, gun legislation, and school shootings. So that's what I'm working on now. Follow me because I need your input. Thanks so much for coming tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Up next, we have Kate Turner.
In 2015, I trekked back to Bowling Green State University to finish my undergraduate degree. Back to a place where I had previously shattered my soul to pick up the pieces and start again. I had left with a 2.0 GPA, a lost scholarship to play Division I soccer, and a life growing in my body. Now, a mother of 2, I made the decision to return. 1, because I wanted to finish my degree for myself and my children. 2, because there was a fissure in me that only art could fill. It was only after I touched the bottom would I give myself room to look up. I had 2 replicas of my retinas looking up at me with a gaze that gave me strength to move forward. A reoccurring motif in the work I was making was the body. Coupled with my first dip into gender studies, I was beginning to cultivate an auto-theoretical practice. I was using art to examine my experience as a queer woman, a mother, and other identities I adorn. As phrases like "the personal is political" and "the Christ biomask" filled my notebooks, those notebooks grew tentactical webs to my sketchbooks. In the 4 semesters I had left, I managed to put together a body of work that will then get me into the school I wrote down as Dream School. The word in that context, at that time, meant I was dreaming if I thought I would actually get in. I still have the voicemail Matt King left me telling me I got in. I packed the kids up, and we again moved once more to Richmond, Virginia, where I attended VCU to follow that dream. Here I would meet professors that had keys to locked parts of my mind. They would so generously use these keys to open doors to new ways of thought, process, and art making. I would TA for Guadalupe Marbia and discover the power of performance. When the door to performance was opened, a fog would spill out that would add another layer to my practice. Coming out of the fog is a term used by adoptees to describe a time when they become aware that the adoption system often installs a veil that cloaks the pain and trauma adoption has placed over their identity. A performance titled Birth Certificate, where I opened my original birth certificate for the first time in public, led me on a path to reunification with my biological family. Adoptees are often conditioned to be grateful for their experiences and not question the negative. Performance and installation would give me the tools to talk about my experiences as a transracially adopted child and begin to dissect my diasporic relationship to my Blackness. Through this work, I have been able to start many conversations that often begin with, "I can relate to that." That feeling of connection fills a longing I have had since I was a child. That feeling is what drives me to continue to make the work that I do, to harness the power of storytelling in a way that builds bridges. I was starting to feel less like a lonely scarecrow tasked as a silent observer of a growing hegemonic monoculture as I began to understand that those tethers that bound me would wither away the more I kept moving. Once I released myself from those binds, the map of my life became a palimpsest, leaving room for possibilities. My journey brought me to the Galveston Artist Residency Program, where my proximity to import and export led me to make work around athletics and a system that used my body like a product for entertainment, a system that tells adopted black athletes like Colin Kaepernick and Michael Orr to shut up and play. My journey brought me to the Roswell Artist in Residency Program, where a little town would make me reflect of hometown and being a lonely, weird black child in a predominantly white environment. An environment that will celebrate your touchdown in the paper but won't let you take out their daughter. I have gained more than a biological family on this ride. I have also gained a cohort of collaborators who are also on a quest of the dissidents to decolonize institutions, fight against the erasure of equity and diversity, and build steps over systemic impediments to break ceilings and windows one brick at a time. I want to thank everyone at Southwest Contemporary and 516 Gallery for providing this platform to continue asking the questions that need to be asked, to continue to have the conversation that need to be had. Thank you for your support, and I am truly honored to show next to these amazing 11 artists. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Up next, we have Cougar and Zoe Vigil.
Danju, Shiji, and Doi. My name is Cougar Vigil. I'm Hickory Apache from Dulce, New Mexico. And I've got my BFA from College of Santa Fe and my MFA from Pratt Institute. But my education in photography began more than 20 years ago. What you're seeing right now is photographs that are the core of my archive. These photographs only exist in my archive, and I only share during presentations like this and talks, lectures that I give across, that I give. The work that I present in the back is kind of, I have to tell a story because this is very protected. I tried to, I realized I'm a participant in the history of photography, and the history of photography is not a great one. The camera is an apparatus to colonialism, and as an indigenous person, I have to navigate these problems of extraction and exploitation. So, but at the time, these photographs you're seeing right now were taken more than 20 years ago when I was a teenager. And even then, I realized that there was problems with what I was, photographing, because these people that I am photographing didn't really have great outcomes. Statistically, I should not be here right now. I should be, if I continued following my friends, I'd probably be in prison. I'd probably be an alcoholic. I probably would be dead. But in a lot of ways, photography saved my life because it was an outlet for me. I was a little kid taking pictures constantly, roaming the hallways of school, roaming the streets of Dulce, and just constantly photographing. And little did I know now that these photographs would be very resourceful. That little kid, that little Apache kid, didn't know that, I would be passing on these histories through my work. I've been documenting my community for almost 20 years now, even through the pandemic, which was, pretty difficult. So I'm very protective of this work, and it only comes through images that are in these canvases behind you. you know, I'm always thinking about like, you know, my role in the history of photography. And, you know, some of these cyanotypes are responding to Anna Atkins, who, you know, was an English botanist in the 1800s. And the plants she picked up, I always wondered, like, what did she do? You know, how did she harvest these plants? And so the work I'm doing now is just really thinking about, you know, the plants and using cyanotypes. But the plants have a use, and I'm not just out there extracting these plants just for, you know, artistic purposes. You know, they are, there's a way, you know, we have to harvest these plants, like offering tobacco, or, you know, just, you know, and making sure that whatever I pick is being used. So whether it be, and these plants are very recognizable to my people. So it was very interesting to see some of them come in and they'll be like, wow, you know, they easily read it, you know, and I was like, yeah, that really resonated with me. So I am constantly photographing my community. I still use film, I use, you know, digital photography, but I'm also aware of, like, of how these photographs live. I don't want to participate in just being the only person that benefits from these photographs. Because like I said, many of these people did not have great outcomes. You know, for my graduating class, I graduated from the res, and most of these, there's more dead people than who have an associate's degree. You know, there's more babies than who have bachelor's degrees from my class. So I'm always trying to figure out like how to get this work out there, but without, you know, being like this little benefactor, without monetarily benefiting from, you know, this work. And it's always a struggle that I'm going through. So when I present my work, it's always manipulated. It's always highly edited. You know, you will never see a face. You will never see a recognizable face. But, you know, I pull these elements in, and I'm always thinking like, you know, and I do want to get these photographs out. A lot of these places don't exist anymore. You know, there's constant change that happens on the reservation, for good and bad. And, you know, I will always be there to, you know, be a witness, to be a participant. So this is the core of my work. You know, the work that I will, you know, present publicly will always be, you know, the like to see the canvases. You know, and I have to thank, you know, that little 14-year-old self, you know, for taking these photographs, to beginning that journey, and, you know, it led me here. So that's it.
Thank you, Cougar. Up next we have Benjamin Winans.
Good evening, all. It is an honor to be here with these 11 amazing other artists and to be invited here to speak with you tonight. I like to begin my talks with ritual invitation, a grounding sense of being together, human beings sharing a pause. So I invoke communion, the sharing or exchanging of intimate thoughts and feelings, especially when the exchange is on a mental or spiritual level. In communion, there is community, sharing, ritual practice, and embodied experience with symbolism at the center. The practice of communion uses symbols and ritual as a focus for meditation. But what if we were to deconstruct those symbols, learning their history and that history's relationship to the present? How does our relationship shift? How does the ground beneath us shift? Broadly put, when we examine the systems of belief that define us, what is exposed and what reaction is then compelled? In my work, I share with you my doubts and my loss of faith. Born in the American South and raised as the Southern Baptist son of ministers and missionaries, I implicate my own past through creative inquiry, as I test the relationships between evangelical Christianity, white supremacist ideology, and Christian nationalism, which is the ideology that asserts America is a Christian nation and seeks to bring American law in line with certain interpretations of biblical law. My methodology is the destruction of material symbols, but it is not iconoclasm. In iconoclasm, one knows exactly what the act of destroying means. It is an erasure, a ritual cleansing. Rather, I adopt another ritual, something anthropologist Bruno Latour called iconoclash. This act is a pause, a hesitation, an action that is troubling because in the act one must inquire whether it is destructive or constructive. Thus I create ruins and I leave them for you as a poetic representation, simultaneously stripped of power and infused with mystery, given meaning by each person who views the work, all of you. Ruins are reminders of the impermanence of things, tragic, and also sites and artifacts that we can stand on individually and collectively to seek to build something better. A world reimagined, overcoming what was already there. All these ideas are large, I know. 5 minutes is hardly enough to dive deeper, and I want to. I don't have time to tell you the importance of the material itself. Fire and blood, bronze and stone. Each one has importance that transcends the work. If Christianity begins with the word, then these materials are a language as integral to shaping these ideas as the sun is to articulating the New Mexican sky. Fire and blood, both present and absent, represent purity and taint, a paradox which allows us to settle into the gray. I have no answers, and I offer none. No good finale that will allow us to leave together, close the doors, and have resolution. Rather, I offer you a benediction that whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence, and if anything is worthy of praise, dwell on these things and reimagine with me. May grace and peace be with you and with me. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. How about another big round of applause for all of you? I just want to end on the final note of thanking all the artists. It was an honor to hear you all speak. And a reminder that the show continues through September 2nd, so you're welcome to come back and spend more time with the work. Thank you for being here tonight, and thanks again to the artists. Have a good evening.